Before we begin, thank you very much to Teacup Size Convoy for joining the Patreon campaign. That's such a tiny idea. Now don't get me wrong. we got like various convoys that would be the size of a teacup or would even fit inside of a teacup. But a big convoy the size of a teacup would be like pocket-sized woolly mammoth, which is like sounds like the cutest thing in the world. You basically have a hamster with tusks, and that might be the cutest mental image I've had in a while. So thank you for that. Thank you for continuing the joke. We'll get through all of these different sized convoys eventually. There's only so many sizes things can be. So, we had a few new interesting drops happen in the news this week, and we already talked about one. That would be the Lego Megatron speculation, what that could turn into. So now we get to do more speculation, because the other thing that came up was a list of code names for upcoming Transformer collabs. And this is always exciting stuff, because the names, if you were unfamiliar with this, the names are always very loosely connected to what the collab turned out to be. It's basically a word that reminds everyone in the design team just enough of that thing they're working on to know what you're talking about when you refer to the project with hushed tones. So we get very simple, vague, broad stroke clues that are nevertheless clues. So let us actually delve into them and see exactly what we are getting out of this, or at least speculate. So the first thing on the list is kick. So if I think kick with collab, the first thing I think of is like past collabs that they have done, and that does bring up things like the Street Fighter collab. So it could be something video game based. You know, we've had video game based collabs now, so yeah, if you want to throw a fighting game in there, that is possible. Though the most famous kicker in that entire game is Chun-Li, who already has a Transformer toy. Now, this would be fun, but at the same time, difficult to continue, because they did this with Thrilling 30 and Titan's Return molds. So we've kind of gone beyond that at this point. I feel like if they went back and revisited this collab possibility, yeah, that wouldn't turn out great. They wouldn't mesh. There's the word. So this is just more or less just spitballing. Now, if you know me, you know what I think of when you say kick. I say rider kick, and with a new Kamen Rider pushing into the West officially, maybe, just maybe, it would be the coolest thing. It would be the coolest thing. And you know, Hasbro would love to do a Transformer Kamen Rider, specifically because they could sell 2 of every toy. Because you would need one that transforms into the motorcycle, but then you'd also need one in robot mode to ride said motorcycle. It's a Junkion thing. But there's a few problems here. Number one is I don't think they're working well with Bandai anymore, hence like the whole Power Rangers Super Sentai mess that's going on right now. But also, you'd be very limited, because it would have to be someone who looked like the bike and the rider in both modes. And most of the time, Kamen Riders tend to stand out from their bikes, so they're easy to see apart from each other. You know, things like Kamen Rider X8 is bright pink. He rides a bright yellow motorcycle. Aspects like that, right? So it would have to be someone who matched their motorcycle, and the motorcycle wasn't just a dirt bike that barely has any mass to turn into a robot. You'd be left with the only ones I could think of off the top of my head were like Double and Kiva, maybe O's, but for the most part, it might be a dead end. That one was probably not going to work out. God, I would wish this was it, though. Oh, I wish this was it. No, see, I went back and started thinking more about the stuff that they have done in the past. They like sticking to 80s properties. They like sticking to things that feel in the same vibe and era of Transformers. And the word clues are far more vague than that. So I thought of what's the most famous kick I can remember from the 80s. and it's this one. It's the crane kick from the Karate Kid. So, very popular 80s movie, check. A license that really likes to get thrown around by whoever wants to use it, check. Do we have a vehicle that we can use? Well, yes, we do. Because we have this classic car that was featured in the movie. This was the wax on, wax off scene. All right, that one that is like the most famous scene from the movie. On top of that, look at the color. Yeah, it's an off-white. It's a cream white color. I feel like it's just close enough that if you transform this into a robot, you could get a karate-gi look out of it, and I don't think anyone would think otherwise. You could absolutely get away with this. Of everything I'm going to speculate on, which a lot of this is wild, none of this is official, some of them I don't really even have picks, I'm just giving ideas into the universe. But of everything I think of in this video, this is the one I think I'm absolutely correct on. So this is like a bold prediction here. It's going to be this turning into a karate transformer. That's my guess. Back to the list now. Let's see what number 2 is. The number 2 on there is race. And that, I mean, we turn things into cars all the time in this franchise. So that doesn't really narrow anything down. First thought that comes to mind is NASCAR. That's, America's race franchise. Few problems with that, though. Number 1, who do you pick? Because last I checked, the sport doesn't really have any big stars left. You'd have to go and do someone vintage, like an Earnhardt or something. 2, NASCAR isn't nearly as popular as it used to be. It's been struggling to maintain relevance. And 3, we kind of already went here. We got transforming NASCARs in Dark of the Moon. Yes, some of them were loaded with machine guns, but, it's America. So, we need to figure out something different. It's not going to be NASCAR. I thought about more international appeal and going Formula 1, but then all you're really doing is repainting a Mirage and then sending it back out into the land. Now, you could do that. You could pick a really popular Formula 1 car. You could pick like the top star of the sport right now, and you could just deco a Mirage in those colors, put the sponsors on them, and send him on his way. Problem is, most popular or successful cars are usually based on cigarette brands, including the one on screen right now. So that is not going to fly. So so they would have to come up with a lot of fakey, like Cybertrillion sponsorship things. They've done that a lot in the past, so that's not the hardest thing to do, but also it feels low effort, doesn't it? It just kind of feels low effort because they've done, they've got an F1 vehicle, mold in Mirage. All they'd have to do is repaint it. Wouldn't make much sense to just make a brand new one. I got a little bit weird with this one and thought to myself, like, we already have the Sonic collab where Sonic's vehicle mode is based on how he looks in his racing games. So I thought, well, what if we retool it into Shadow? Which is entirely doable. And if you're going to sell an individual Sonic character as a Transformer, Shadow's probably the one to do it as. You'd use, okay, it's fine. Multi-pack Sonic and Tails. That's fine. But, like, Shadow's going to sell on his own no matter what. It's just a shame if it was closer to movie 3, it'd have a guarantee sell. His figure was sold out everywhere for months. Took me a long time to complete that set. I don't really have a solid answer for this one because race literally could mean any style of race car in any aspect of the sport. So it doesn't even need to be a car. It could be a racing plane, could be a racing boat. I don't know. This one is entirely up in the air. It's too vague. Speaking of too vague, the next one is just green. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to speculate on green? See, the most famous green characters I can think of, especially with vehicle associations, we've already got. That's the Ninja Turtles, in what might be the most perfect collab item we've ever had. One toy, all 4 turtles, plus an original character, plus the turtle wagon, the party wagon as the vehicle mode. It's perfect. Like, it literally is like one of the best they've ever done. So, what else? What other fictional characters are green? I mean, I wouldn't buy it, but I would laugh. You would too, don't lie. This is the pre-tool for animated Bulkhead. It would be so funny, but it's not going to happen. Shrek doesn't have any vehicles attached to him, maybe a carriage, but none that are green. This is tricky though. Like I started looking up green pop culture characters, and like there really isn't all that much that is suited for this. Like, do I really believe that Jolly Green Giant is going to get a Transformer before Botanica does? That would seem cruel. I mean, you go easy. They've already got the license for the Hulk. They could just make, they could just retool like Megatronus into the Hulk and just call it a crossover. God, that seems lame, though. Oh, it seems lame. Yeah, I don't think that's it either. I don't think that's it either. I feel like when I was coming up with, like, well, what characters are green? And then I realized that's way too close. Like, the clues that they leave as those code words, they're always, like, loosely connected. It's only, like, a reminder, not always a direct reference. So, if I think of, like, what else do I think of when I think of green? What comes to mind is, let's see, the first thought that came to mind is, it ain't so easy being green. So I started thinking about the Studebaker from the Muppet movie, specifically this one, which would be a paint deco nightmare. But then again, collabs can get away with that because they could just price it however they want. But yeah, like this car would make, like, do it like they did with like the Disney crossover figures where like you could see the characters inside the car, and the transformation doesn't affect, their position there. That would be really neat. Weird. It'd be neat. And again, you're still in that realm of, 80s vehicle from a popular 80s movie. They seem to want to throw Muppets into everything right now. So that's an outside possibility. The other thought that came to my mind was, well, there's another definition of green outside of just the color, and that is the lifestyle of being green, of being environmentally friendly. And it starts going back to other classic franchises that had vehicles that Transformers could turn into. And the thought went to the Geo Cruiser from Captain Planet. This is just a neat vehicle that I wouldn't mind a Transformer out of. Let's get that out of the way. But yeah, this is a weird pull, but also would not surprise me in the least. Now, when you look at this thing, you think of how you do this as a Transformer collaborative figure. The big brain move is to give it a robot mode that has aspects of Captain Planet, like a steel blue to replicate his like skin color, like a flat top helmet that's green to give him the same appearance, even though he's mostly wearing the yellow. So it doesn't have to be like strictly Captain Planet popping out of this thing. You'd have to shell former it to do that, and that's not going to make anyone happy. But little aspects and just colorations that give you that impression of Captain Planet in the robot mode while still being a completely new character. That's the big brain version. The galaxy brain version is make Bumblebee a Planeteer. You just have this it already looks like a Bumblebee toy, doesn't it? So you have it transform into Bumblebee, but you've redone the chest to have a lower layer to it that has the Planeteer shirt underneath, like the blue shirt with the planet logo in the middle. You know how fast I would buy that? That would be an amazing way of using this as a crossover. I mean, you think of this, like, that makes it a completely safe one. Like, maybe you don't know where the nostalgia value in Captain Planet lies right now. Well, it doesn't matter, because it turns into Bumblebee. So every Bumblebee collector out there, high bees, all of them are going to be after this thing. So you've made a completely safe toy at the same time. Pay me. Someone from Hasbro has to be watching this daily nonsense I've been putting on for over 4 years. Pay me. no one in your R&D is giving you an idea that good, I would buy it. I would absolutely buy it. I'm going to lock that in as a prediction, but I will admit I'm probably wrong. I don't care. That's an incredible one. The next word is song, and this again does not give us a whole lot of options, but we do have one caveat to this, is that it's going to be a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. So that does limit the pool. San Diego Comic-Con exclusives are almost exclusively repaints, maybe a head swap retool, and that is it. You know, you're not going to get a completely brand new mold that you can only buy at San Diego Comic-Con because it's just too expensive to run up one mold for one convention. So we need to pick out what mold it's going to be. Now, the first thing that came to mind was the Balvintron, one of the last music crossovers we had. So it's entirely possible they could just run this back with like the 86 Soundwave mold, or they could put in another performer. I mean, if you want the hilarious option, you take the 86 Soundwave mold, you paint it in light blue, metallic blue colors, and you give it a Rumble figure that's been retooled to look like Hatsune Miku. That's what you do. You make the Hatsune Soundwave that everyone has done fan art of. And you make Miku like a little transforming tape that can drop into his chest, like she's piloting Soundwave or something. It would work. It would work. But that said, I don't think they want to revisit this concept. It really could just be like a Blaster or Soundwave repaint based off of like a popular musical artist or something. But the other thought that came to my mind was the upcoming Frequency mold for the Stranger Things crossover, because that is just straight up an 80s van. The robot mode does not have any kind of sculpt or anything to make it look like it's specifically a Stranger Things reference. It's all done in deco, meaning this is a blank slate. You can redo this however you want. And what occurs to me about like just a big flat panel 80s van is that this is the kind of stuff you'd use for touring before you could afford that big fancy custom bus. So a lot of 80s bands would have been in one of these for a good duration of their career before they genuinely made it. You know, this is when you're just making a name for yourself. Maybe don't even have that first record label under your belt, but you're getting plenty of local gigs. This is what you would tour around your tri-state area in. So it's even if the band didn't use one of these 80s vans as like tour vans are so iconic that you can just make tributes to bands by just painting them down the side. And we need an 80s act for that. So that comes down to like maybe Kiss, because Kiss loves to give the license to literally anybody. Metallica would also be a good option. Actually, they did tour in a van like this before they really hit it off. The one I would want more than anything that I think would be a fantastic piece, a fantastic tribute, Weird Al. The man is now like permanently linked to Transformers. Has been since the '86 movie when his Dare to Be Stupid was used for the album, which was apparently just his record label's idea, but linked him to the franchise to the point where he returns to it to become Wreck-Gar for animated, and then more recently, we get him as Cosmos for Earthspark. And then chalk up, a live appearance at an official BotCon, and you've got, a bit of a Transformer legacy, and one of the most beloved legacies for a Transformers creator. I mean, you could do Stan Bush as like a tribute to him as well, but genuinely, Weird Al would just be the best pick ever, wouldn't it? And remember, this is a toy. A reason I pick Frequency to begin with is because it has a Soundwave-esque gimmick. It has, that little bird character that transforms into an 8-track to stick into its belly. So it is a musically themed vehicle, and it would make a lot of sense, So that was the thought that occurred to me. That's what I would like, but genuinely I have no idea what this one could be. Okay, next up is a weird one. So, yeah, I don't know what to make exactly of Symmetry. Now, I did look this up just in case there is a definition that's spelled that way, but as far as I can tell, no. It is literally just a popular misspelling of cemetery, which this now gets morbid. So what characters would like make me think of cemeteries, or what thing would I be reminded of if someone mentioned a cemetery? The obvious one is like maybe they just do Ecto 1, but without all the stuff on top. They just make him a normal hearse. That would be morbid. Okay. But pop culture characters associated with the dead. How about that? Me as a wrestling fan thinks The Undertaker. And you would think of all of the like 80s and 90s brands, or the brands that were gigantic in the 80s and 90s that you like identify as like 80s and 90s brands. You would think wrestling would have come up as a collaborative by now, especially since Hasbro and Mattel have shown themselves to be working together on a few projects pretty peacefully, not just like all the Hot Wheel collabs we've got on both sides, but remember, that's how the Jurassic Park stuff came about too. They'd have to make sure that Mattel was okay handing the license over for those releases, and they got to do 2 of them. That means something. So, you could get away with this. You could have that. But then again, he'd be a hearse that turns into The Undertaker. That's a stretch. It's definitely doable, but that's a stretch. You could go for something zombie-based, which would take you to like Michael Jackson and Thriller. Again, sticking to the 80s vibes that collaboratives generally like to hold to. But there's no vehicle attached to that. You just have to come up with something. As long as the robot mode looks like it's wearing the red jacket, I think you're fine. It could also, for all I know, just be a collaboration to like continue the Universal Monsters lines, That said, I got to thinking of what other characters, like what other pop culture icons would a cemetery remind me of? And the thought went to the Munsters because they have a famous car. The Munster Mobile, like that vehicle, I've shown it in a past video. That would be a really neat thing to have as a transforming toy, but the problem with it is it's an open air vehicle. It's very thin in areas. I don't necessarily think it would work engineering wise. So then I thought to myself, okay, well, the Munsters are also a very old property. Unless you've watched Nick at Night, you probably never saw them. If you're watching one of these videos. So what else? Well, there's the Addams Family. The Addams Family keeps coming up. That's actually a far more relevant one, especially with the current show going on. So I thought to myself, okay, let's see if the Addams Family has any famous vehicles attached to them. Oh, wait. That TV show has one. So this thing shows up in Wednesday, and yeah, we'll start as is based on a real world vehicle. There is customizing that has been done to it, but this is something that is, again, completely doable for a collab. And it makes sense with Stranger Things ending and Hasbro not being able to continue milking that one for collabs. This makes sense to me. This actually makes sense to me. I wouldn't mind it myself. It's not a bad looking vehicle. Ominous, but not bad looking. And yeah, like it feels like, because like Wednesday is another one of those licenses that I see all over the place. Like everyone seems to be doing some kind of merch for Wednesday right now. So it wouldn't surprise me for Hasbro to get into it too, especially, with Stranger Things gone. It's in that same vibe, So this is another one where I'm going to lock this in as my prediction. Like this is the one that I think we are getting for that particular collab name. And that just leaves one, and this one is not ambiguous at all. It just straight up says Monster Jam 1, just like the Hot Wheels collabs did. And let's be honest here. If you've got the license to Monster Jam, there's no one you're doing first other than the Gravedigger. See, normally when I do these videos in general, anything where I'm naming off a whole bunch of things, I usually only pick like something in the middle of the video to make into the thumbnail, but of everything on this list, this is by far the most obvious and by far the thing that I think is going to happen more than anything. I don't even have to predict this. This is a spoiler. We're getting a transforming Gravedigger. That said, the trick to a monster truck transformer has always been, how do you do it? How do you incorporate those gigantic wheels into a functioning robot? We saw what happened when G.I. Joe Bumblebee tried to have these gigantic wheels as part of its robot mode. It didn't work out. The toy was a mess, and it did not play well, and it made me sad because it's such a good idea that is just not easy to execute. So how would you deal with 4 gigantic wheels? Now, like for the suspension and all that, you know, it's mostly hollow under there except for the bars. I'm not worried about that. Most toys just put like a black underside and just paint the frame shape. So it's very few toys that are actually like, you can see all the way through those frames. So I'm just kind of looking at, what do you do with the tires? This is going to be an amazing looking transformer, no matter what. But what do you do with those freaking tires? I'm more excited by the fact that it's just Monster Jam 1. So now you're left with, like, well, what other monster trucks are we getting? Like, Gravedigger's by far the most popular and famous monster truck right now. Mostly because, you know, Bigfoot's been asleep since like the 90s. So, yeah. This is undoubtedly what we were going to get. It's just a matter of when. So, there we go. We love going through all the leak stuff. It's fun to speculate. It's fun to come up with weird ideas. And I'm sure there's so many I missed. There's so many other ideas I missed out on. All these are incredibly vague and could be many, many things. So please feel free to discuss it in the comments below. I am here mostly to give you a starting point of what any of these could be. For all I know, Kick is a complete throw-off and it's a one-punch man. Like, for all I know, that's the trick behind the name reference. But there we go. As always, please feel free to comment and discuss in the comment section below. And as always, I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.